All right, so for this section, we're going to talk about the quadratic formula. So this is a way for us to solve a quadratic equation for our values of x, where the graph crosses the x-axis. So sometimes there's one, sometimes there's two answers, most of the time there's going to be two, sometimes there's no solution. All right, but this is the formula that we're going to be using to do all of these problems. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. I know it sounds like a mouthful, but we've solved by factoring, we've solved by graphing, but this is a way to solve if we can't factor it, and it's kind of a surefire way to solve it either way. So I think even though it looks intimidating now, it will make sense as we go. All right, so this is why we've been identifying A, B, and C in our quadratic so that we can eventually lead to plug it into this formula. So, step one of this will be make sure it's always set equal to 0. So if it's like 2x squared plus 3x equals 5, make sure you subtract 5 from both sides to get it to 2x squared plus 3x minus 5 equals 0, so that we can then identify A, B, and C. All right. Also make sure that's in standard form. That's kind of a given. So again, so we can identify A, B, and C. And then we identify them. Then we substitute them into these problems. And then we simplify. This is, we can do one of two ways. If you're going to simplify it and show your work, I always say simplify this part first. Then we can write up two separate equations, one addition, one subtraction. Or we can actually just put it straight into our calculator. And then this plus and minus, I'll tell you kind of how we're going to handle that, because there's usually two answers. All right, so this would be an example of going through all the steps. So for example, if we have x squared minus 5x equals negative 6, we would first add 6 to both sides so that we are in standard form. This will allow us to identify our a, b, and c as 1, because that goes with the x squared, negative 5 for b, and then 6 for our c. So if we substitute now these numbers into the quadratic formula, so x equals negative b, which would be negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is again negative 5, minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. All right, so if we just simplify the inside, we would have negative 5 here, plus or minus, and then one way we can do it, and again, I'm going to show you an easier way, but this is like the long way, I guess. This would be if you don't have a Desmos calculator with you where you can actually see it, this is how I recommend doing it. So we're going to simplify this inside part. So parentheses, negative 5 minus 4, parentheses 1, parentheses 6, and that gives us... I forgot to square this. Put that square in there. So that gives us 1. The square root of 1, all divided by 2a, which would be 1 again. So this actually works out kind of nice and neat. So then what we have to do after we simplify this part, then we set up two equations. This plus or minus means we have to do this plus the square root of 1 divided by 1, and then this minus the square root of 1 divided by 1. Now, if we actually simplify these, negative 5 would be 5. The square root of 1 is 1, divided by 2 times 1, which is 2, which is 6 divided by 2, which would be 3. So there's one of our answers. So over here we have 5 minus 1 divided by 2. 5 minus 1 is 4, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So my two answers for this would be 3 and 2. All right, so that would be, if you have a basic calculator, I would advise you not to do all in one step. But if we have our Desmos calculator, I think it's good for us to be able to go ahead and take that step to be able to type it in as we see it. However, we are going to have to type in two separate equations, one with a plus and one with a minus, and we're going to set that up on these next few examples. All right, so I'm going to go to Desmos, and I'm going to type in the quadratic formula. All right, so I am going to bring this up. So x equals, so negative, and again, I'm putting parentheses for everything I don't have, negative b, and I'm going to use plus for this first one, plus, because I can't put a plus or minus, square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. And on the bottom, we're dividing that by 2a. All right, so now I'm going to set up this exact same one. I wonder if I can copy this. I don't know. No, I don't think I can. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to set up the same thing, but instead of a plus, I'm going to put a minus. So negative b, oops, let me start with the fraction. So negative b minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. All right, so the good thing about this, if I have these ready to go, all I really have to do is identify a, b, and c, and then I can plug them in and get my two solutions. So again, it seems intimidating, but once you get the formula down, it's actually quite easy. So for a, I am going to identify my a, b, and c to start. So my a equals 1, my b equals negative 2, and my c equals negative 8. So if we're going to put this into the quadratic formula, so x equals negative b, which is negative 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 8. That's my AC. And we divide that whole thing by 2. 2 times 1, basically. All right, so this, because that plus or minus, and now I have it over here on my calculator, I'm going to type that in to get my answers. All right, and I like to do this so that I can see what I'm putting in here. Here I have my negative 2. And then I have negative 2 here. And I have my 1. And I have my negative 8. All right, and divided by 2 times 1, and it gives us 4. So one of my solutions is x equals 4. Now you could retype this all in. That might be what you want to do. Or I can back this out and put a minus. And then I can see my second answer is negative 2. And that's, we could factor this. We could use the zero product property. I don't think, is this factorable? Negative 8. It should be, right? So if I had this, x and x, so 8 is 1 and 8, 2 and 4. So we could use a negative 4 to positive 2. Set each of these equal to 0, and we'll get our 4 and our negative 2. So you could factor it to solve the answers, but the quadratic equation will make it so that even if it's not factorable, you'll be able to get your answer. So let's go ahead and check out this example on B. And I'm going to back these out. And again, if you remember to just change that plus and minus, you really don't have to write both of these equations down. But using this Desmos calculator, you can see how it's kind of nice for us. All right, so in this example, you can see it's not set equal to 0, so we have to set it to equal first by subtracting 117 from both sides. So I get x squared minus 4x minus 117 equals 0. Now I can identify my a, b, and c, which you guys are getting good at. That's why we've been practicing it. So a is 1, b is negative 4, and c is negative 117. All right, so now I just have to put these into my quadratic formula. If you still don't have it memorized, remember, just go back here. Here it is. Negative b, so it's b, b, a, c, a over there. So I'm going to look here. I'm going to have this side by side. X equals negative b, which would be negative 4 in there. Plus or minus, this one's plus. Square root of b squared, so negative 4 again. Minus 4 times a, which is 1. Times c, which is negative 117, divided by 2a, and we get 13 for one of our x's. So x equals 13. That's one of my solutions. Now again, you can re-plug it in here. So if I did negative 4 here, 1, negative 117, and a 1 here, I get negative 9 as my other solution. All right, so the other way to do that, instead of retyping this in, is just back out that plus and make it a minus, and you'll get your -9. All right, so that's probably going to save you a lot of time to be able to do it that way. All right, so again, now these came out nice and neat. Let's see what happens if it's not factorable. All right, so pause this. Why not give it a shot? So here I have A, B, and C. A is -3. B is 5. C is -2. So x equals -b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. And I'm going to put these in. So -b would be 5, 5. A would be -3. C is -2 divided by 2a, which is -3. And now let's go back to our trusty calculator. So I'm going to back these out so I can put in my correct numbers. Again, it's just identifying A, B, and C, knowing this formula, and you just put them in. So here we go. 5 here. 5, -3, -2. This is -3 at the bottom. And remember, this is it's plus or minus, right? So here's a plus. So you can see we get 2/3 or -0.6 repeating. So we have x equals 0.6 repeating. But then when I back this out and I put the minus for that same one, I also have x equals 1. So those are my two solutions. All right, then let's do the last one. Let's get rid of all this stuff. So again, if you're using that Desmos calculator, it's good for you. If not, we kind of have to break it down and do it in segments like we did on that first example. So here we have A equals 7, B equals -2, C equals -8, and I can do that because it's already set equal to 0. So x equals -b, all right, plus or minus square root of b, which is -2, squared minus 4 times 7 times -8. And we divide that whole thing by 2 times 7. All right, I like to see this set up so I can see that you're putting it in correctly. And then when we do our answer, so I'm going to want to see the A, B, and C, the initial setup, and then go ahead and use your calculator for it. So let's see what we get for this. I'm going to change this to plus to start, and then we'll change it to a minus at the end. So -2, -2 again, 7, -8, and we get a 7 here. And so one of our solutions for x equals 1.22. I'll just round it to that. And our other solution for x, when I back this out and put a minus, is -0.93. So you can see it's a good way to use it when they're not going to be factorable, come out nice and neat. I'll show you how this relates to the actual graph. So again, I brought up the Desmos graphing calculator. I'm going to type this in there. So 7x squared minus 2x minus 8. You can see here where they cross the x-axis, 1.221 and -0.93, or I could have called it 4 to round to the 100th. But either way, algebraically, this is how we can use the quadratic formula to solve for the x's in our graph. And you can use this for any of the equations, the factorable ones and the ones that are not factorable.